On the next episode of Painting and Travel, we're in St. Augustine, Florida, where Sarah meets the designer and builder of an unusual truck. Roger includes the vehicle in his landscape painting in Lighthouse Park.
Hey, hello. I'm very glad you're here to see this one-of-a-kind truck. We'll meet the designer right after Roger completes a sketch of this custom, hand-built, head-turning, eye-catching ride.
There are so many curves, ellipses, and perspective issues to take into consideration when drawing a vehicle, so it's not an easy task. My intention here is not to create a totally accurate and finished drawing, but rather just to have a few minutes of observation with it to get familiar with the subject. In the painting I'm planning on, the car is going to be quite small, so a sketch like this is really just for my own enjoyment. There won't be any detail in this sketch, so I'm using a soft pencil, and the paper takes the line easily and quickly. I can also smudge the graphite to create a few soft areas. I'm adding a few palm trees in the back. Things like this just take a few quick lines where accuracy doesn't matter nearly as much as getting those curved lines right on the truck.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Painting and Travel here in St. Augustine, Florida. This is Charlie Molesky, and he's created an art vehicle, which he'll hopefully tell us about. What do you think? How did this happen?
Well, I tried to find an old truck, and I hunted around, found half a dozen of them, and nobody wants to part with them.
Because sentimental attachment.
Exactly, yeah. So I said, well, I'm not going to wait anymore. I'm going to go ahead and just start building it. So I had this Suburban where I got the engine and the running gear from. So then I chopped the body up and narrowed it so I could put these older fenders on it. I hacked through everything.
So that's super labor intensive. You've got to cut
I had
through the metal.
a year and a half in this and just started playing with it, and it just sort of evolved.
So you cut this in half lengthwise?
Yeah.
And then you took out something and you put it back together and...
Right. And then I cut the back off it because it's a full SUV, and made it into a pickup truck. And then the hood from it is the back of this body here. One of my favorite things with the car, I discovered on a previous car, and that is how easy it is to work on if you just flip the whole thing.
And did you have to create a new hood?
Yeah, the hood is actually from a 35 Ford.
And the windshield has a different look to me. I can't quite figure it out.
Yeah, because it was a wider vehicle, I had to get away with it, and it's curved glass. So I had to use straight glass for easy access. But I'm not a fine artist. In other words,
Okay.
You don't look too close.
Okay.
It looks good 55 miles an hour.
Well, after you complete the body, the shell, how do you know how to hook up the engine again?
Well, you pay some people to do that part.
I have heard some terms that I don't totally know. I've heard rat rod. Where does this fit in?
It's kind of somewhere in the middle.
In the middle, of course.
It's kind of rat rod-ish, but actually a little too nice to be a rat rod, but not nice enough to be a show car. So it's kind of just whatever you want it to be.
Next, let's watch this unique truck become part of Roger's landscape painting.
I'm going to be using a piece of masonite today, and this is covered with gesso. I prefer to use that rather than canvas on these smaller pieces because it's so smooth I can get more detail in, and it doesn't have all that tooth on it that a piece of canvas would. I've sketched this in with some charcoal very quickly, and as you can see, not much needed to be done as far as sketching. This looks pretty rough, but it was just really to establish the composition and the placement of the things like the lighthouse, the trees, and this road, and of course the automobile. I have a lot of colors on my palette today. I have titanium white, I have black, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, Indian yellow, cadmium yellow, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, and these three earth colors, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and burnt umber. I'm going to start just by toning the board with some earth colors here, burnt umber, ultramarine blue, and just get these darks in. My reference picture is on my monitor right over here to my right, so I have a good reference picture to look at. Now I always start with my darks and I work towards my lights. So this is just the block-in stage of the painting. Right here I have a little bit of water. I have a larger bucket of water down below me, but this I can just use to dip in and get my paints a little bit wetter. Now as you can see, there really was no reason to get much more of a drawing in here because a lot of this is landscape, so it doesn't need to be all that accurate. If I were drawing a close-up of the automobile itself in here, then I would have to spend a lot more time drawing. The detailed areas would be, of course, the automobile, which is very small, so not a lot of detail, and then the lighthouse. I'm still staying with my dark values. The values, the lightness and darkness is always more important than the actual color. Most of my paintings are layered, which means that I put one color over another color. And since these acrylics dry so fast, it's easy to do that. This is the road here. Now I didn't put any green out on my palette, and I certainly could, but I think I'll just work with these colors I have on my palette to mix my own greens. This is all very rough brush work. Doesn't need to be detailed at all. Now so far all these are transparent colors, which mean they have no white in them. So that means I will not be picking up any cerulean blue, cadmium yellow, or cadmium red, or the yellow ochre, because those are all opaque colors. And if I were to use some of those opaque colors in here, these area of darks would get chalky looking and a lot lighter. So I want to start with these rich darks first. You can see this has only been a few seconds really, and this is tacked up already. It's almost dry. Now that I do have all my darks in, I can now start with some opaque colors. And we'll start over here maybe with some lighter greens. So cadmium yellow, cerulean blue. But I'll still try and kind of stay with my darks first. And then I'll just work up to my lights as we go along. Right back here is a little bit distant, so I'm going to make that a little bit bluer just to give it some what they call atmospheric perspective. Now in the photograph I can't see that. I can't see that there's really any difference between the foreground here and this middle ground. But just to give the painting that little bit distant look, I'm going to add a little bit of white and a little more blue to that. And hopefully that will sort of give that a little bit of distance more than the photograph will show. Now we'll let that dry for a few moments, and I'm going to do something a little bit different here with this lighthouse. I'm going to paint the lighthouse, and then I'm going to paint the sky around it, and you'll see why here in a little while. Okay, so the lighthouse is a black and white lighthouse, but the white part of the lighthouse is being influenced by the sky. So even that white on the lighthouse is going to be a bluer color. Okay, so these are the stripes on the lighthouse. Now I'm going over the edge of that lighthouse. And now let me put in this white. Now with a smaller brush, I'll take some alizarin crimson and cadmium red. And here's the top of the lighthouse right there. Now this doesn't look good at all, but when I go to put the sky around that, I won't have to cut in these edges of the lighthouse. I can just paint the sky right over that. So we'll do that a little bit later on and let that dry for a few moments. Okay, back to the trees. To get a real dark color, I'm going to take my ultramarine blue and burnt umber. That always gives a nice, rich, dark color, dark value. And we'll put in those really, really darks. Go back to the road again. This is all dry. Now I'll start using my opaque colors. That road is quite blue. It's getting a lot of that light from the sky. Now I want some texture on that road. So I'm going to take my atomizer and spray that very lightly. And in no time at all, those little water droplets are going to pick up the wet paint I just put on there. Now I take a dry brush and I drag that dry brush over that paint that I just put on, and I get these nice little textured spots here that look like little pebbles or looks like a dirt road. I can also take some darker colors, thin this way out, and just splatter this a little bit. And that will also give you some nice texture right on the road. Now, I don't want to overdo this because then it looks gimmicky. I'll let that dry for a moment or two, and then I'll take that dry brush again, go over it, and that'll soften those spots. We have some nice light patches on the road as well. Now those light patches are going to be warm because they're lit by the sun. So I'll take some titanium white and yellow ochre and put a few of those light patches right across the road. Now let me take this brush here, this dry brush again, and I'm dragging that across those little areas that I splattered with paint. That gives this really nice effect. What it's done is it's taken those dark spots of paint and I'm dragging them to the side. It almost looks like there's a little rock and a shadow going that way. So that gives some nice texture on that road. This is quite dry now, so I'm going to take a fan brush and start adding some of this other color of green here, just as many variations of green as I can. And of course at this point I can add white, but what I want to do primarily is keep these areas in one general value. In other words, I want this whole section here to be dark. No matter how much light I put in here, I still want this to read as one dark area. So I can have lights within that, but not to the point where it's going to change the whole composition of this by making it light, dark, light, dark. This whole thing has to be dark. I'm just dancing around here with my brush. Let me get some other colors here. Where this light comes across this road, I would also have some light patches of grass. So there we go, there's some light patches of grass. And on this side, same thing would apply, some light patches. Kind of goes up the hill there. A few more light patches on this side. I'm going to jump back to the sky now, and we'll see how this made sense here with this lighthouse. This is a sort of a pale blue sky. Doesn't have very much color in it. So I'll take cerulean blue, white, maybe a touch of yellow ochre just to warm that. And this sky color doesn't match my photograph, but I'm not so interested in copying the photograph as I am in trying to get a painting here that has a lot of harmonious qualities to it. Now, when I get to the lighthouse, since I've painted those stripes down there, I can just take my brush and drag it right down there. And that basically gives me the shape of that lighthouse. Now I can go over that, I'm sure I will, again with some other paints. That gives me a nice crisp edge on the side of that lighthouse. Enough of that for the moment. Let me take a smaller brush and I'll put in some negative areas. That's the spaces between these trees. Using the same background color here. Now I can't just dab these in anywhere. I'm trying to think of the spaces between the branches when I do this. So when I put this line here and this line here, I'm painting the sky, but what I'm also doing is I'm describing that branch there. Some of this is very intuitive after having done this so much, but I do have to think about it as I go along. Now I try and vary these negative shapes. I don't want them all the same size or going all the same direction. They need to be varied quite a bit. I don't want to overdo this here either, but I can always just paint those out if they just seem to be in the wrong place. Now, let's just describe the edge of this palm tree up here a little more. Now this is always a back and forth process when I paint here. I don't use very much palette space, as you can see. Just keep using this small palette space. Even on very large paintings, I don't use a palette any larger than this. Right now, right in the edge of this road, it's sort of dark here. Leaves and things have spilled out onto the road. Maybe on this side the same. And then just soften those. And we'll take some of that road color and maybe drop that over into the side of the road. Mixing greens is always difficult. Sometimes if I want to get a variation of a green, I'll add the opposite color to it. That will really change the look of the color. I think I want to put a few more light areas across this road. Just give some nice accents to the road there. And right back where this automobile is, I'm going to make that bright as well. Maybe I could just see a little bit of that road between some of that ground cover. Wash my brush. Get some lighter greens, very light green here. I want to bring up the color and the value on these few patches of grass here. See, I'm just jumping around from area to area, building it up a little bit at a time. I'm not staying with one area for very long. I just put a few strokes down, then I move on to something else. Now this blue does work back here. Now it just does push that back. If it were the same color as this, it would look like it was on the same plane. So this being blue sort of pushes that back and this forward. All right, let's deal with that lighthouse now. One side of the lighthouse is lighter than the other side. So I'll use my little ruler here to steady my hand. And I'll just go in here and lighten one side of that. And with some blue, I will darken the other side here of the darker side. Picking up a smaller brush, now I can just add some of those details to the lighthouse. All right, now this does take a few minutes to do because I want to get this accurate. And right now that lighthouse looks too thick, too wide. So I can take some of that background color and just pull that over there again. Makes that nice sharp edge. And I'll put the Fresnel lens in there. Just a little more detail at the top. And I'll put one of the windows in here, right on the side of this lighthouse where the sun is shining on it. I'm going to put just a bit of pure white and then soften this side of it, soften that edge. That should pretty much do it for the lighthouse. Now we have the automobile. Let's tackle that now. I have a photograph of it here. I'll just put it right here for now. And use my pencil once again and sketch that automobile in right here. Now I have long since lost that charcoal indication of where that was, but really this helped me to know where to put this. Okay, it's not very accurate, but it's all I need to give me a start here. Cerulean blue, basically the color of it. And with this very small brush, we'll just put in the big shapes first, like I do on everything else. Get some darker values in here, maybe the windshield. I don't want a lot of contrast back here, but I want some. I don't want the contrast to be so overpowering that it brings too much attention to the automobile. And now let's add the lighter areas. Basically gray, just gray. Put on the bumper. So like I said, I don't want to bring a whole lot of attention to that. This is basically a landscape painting with the inspiration being the vehicle. I think that might be enough for that car. Let's go back and we'll rework some of the foliage now. Take this down. I'm going to spray my palette here. Take a little razor blade and remove some of this paint, just so I have a clear palette once again. I think some lighter greens are still in order. I'm going to spray my board, and that will keep these edges of paint soft, because as I spray the board, when I apply this paint, the paint will sort of flow out just a little bit, keep that nice and soft. Fan brushes are really great for painting weeds. I can just keep this brush at right angles to the painting and just flip it up. Makes weeds nicely and quickly. All right, I have the palm tree up here, which is not very descriptive at the moment. Let's get some dark color, burnt umber, ultramarine blue, and I'll put some of these palm fronds in here. Spray this again. I don't need to get this too descriptive, just enough where you can tell it's a palm tree. I do have an interesting palm frond down here, more towards the bottom, that has kind of died. So let's put that in. These palm fronds towards the base always look a little bit browner. And we have this beautiful crisscross pattern on the trunk. And after putting in those, I can sort of enhance those negative areas some. Again, some dark value here with some brown and blue. And I'm going to work on these edges of the tree. This is a little bit flat in here. Let's put one more palm tree back here. I just take my brush again, right angles to the painting. Just flip that up. I want to keep those kind of vague and soft. Small brush once again. And I'll add a few, maybe other tree trunks back in here. Let's add that telephone pole. Give this some rural look. Telephone pole right here. Now this has to be done with one stroke. There's no going back on this. So I take this stroke here, maybe practice once or twice, and up. I want to add a little bit more color to the grass. yellow, white, maybe just a touch of blue. What I'm trying to do here is get a few areas of grass that don't have a lot of texture in it, that sort of look flat. Too much texture in this painting, it just might be too much. So let me get rid of some of that texture and just make a few planes here with just flat areas. Now this doesn't have very much detail at all in it, but really it just doesn't need much. Your attention is focused right in here, and I don't think I need to put too much else back in that area. We'll just leave it very loose. One of the hardest things always is knowing when to quit, when to stop, because at some point the painting will become worse rather than better, and so it's better to stop a little bit short of that. I'm putting in some more greens here just to make that trunk a little smaller. Well, this painting feels finished to me now, so I'm going to leave it alone. There is always more I could do to this, but it's nice and loose and it gives me the idea of what I was after here.
No one could resist looking at this. If you're driving by them on the street, they're going to follow you or roll down their window and say, "Can I take a picture of you?"
Yeah.
Does that happen a lot?
Well, I get two categories. And some people say it looks terrible, and other people follow me for miles so they can stop and take pictures when I pull up. So
it has good energy for me, and I think it was created with some fun in mind. It's kind of inspiring, that you could just make something from almost like soup. Oh, what's in the refrigerator? We'll put that together and make something.
It evolved actually over a period of time. Yeah.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.